Uh-oh, you still there? I see me. Hey, George. Gotcha. Stand by, folks. In case you're hearing this, we're having a little technical difficulty, but Patrick should be with us shortly. Sorry, folks, we're having a little difficulty with connectivity with Patrick at the moment. We're going to try and get him back on as quickly as possible. What? Something sort of thing happens sometimes. Thank you for hanging on there, folks. We may have had a connectivity problem with Patrick, and we're going to continue working on it for a minute. A few minutes here. We were fine a second ago. Yeah, he may have lost connectivity. Which would be a shame. We were just talking for the last 10 minutes here. I can't get him back right now. can't get him back right now. Ah. Oh, no, it's not him yet. Ah, oh no, it's not him yet. Well, sorry, folks, for the difficulties. We're going to continue trying to reach Patrick back. We had a great connection until just a minute ago. Ah.
Okay, hey, there we are.
There you are.
Sorry about that.
Did you lose connectivity?
I have lost the network for a second.
Okay.
It seems to be back. We're now on my iPad opposed to the computer.
That's awesome. Hey, that helps.
So, and oh, I've got my network back. Yeah, we just lost network for a second.
Okay, super.
So let me switch back to the computer.
Okay.
And then I'll be right back on with you, I hope.
That's terrific. That's terrific. We have people standing by. They're delighted to see you.
Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone standing by. Technical difficulties. One more moment here.
Okay. And I believe we are back. That's great.
Sorry about the delay.
Not a problem. We have all afternoon. Okay. All right. So you, if you're all set and comfortable,
Ready to rock, my friend.
let's do it. Okay. So this is Andy Hofer coming to you today for Full Circle Magic with another in our series of Q&A sessions with notable magicians and mentalists from around the world. Today we're talking with Patrick Redford, noted mentalist and creator of effects including the groundbreaking Prevaricator, his hands-off any card at any number, and many other great effects. He's been a featured Penguin Live lecturer, and his effects have received praise from such notables as Barry Richardson, Danny Archer, Bob Cassidy, Mark Salem, Michael Weber, and Banachek. There's a great quote I saw on your site from Banachek. He said, "Most mentalists are looking for that holy grail of mentalism, that one effect that is really magic. The one effect that is real. Patrick Redford has come as close as it gets." That was Banachek saying that. So please, everyone join me in welcoming Patrick to Full Circle Magic. Good afternoon, Patrick.
Hey, how's everybody doing out there in internet land? I hope they're doing...
I'm sure they're doing fine. Unfortunately, we can't hear them, but at any rate. So,
we can hear them. That's our job.
well, that's true. That's true. Well, you're more advanced than I, that's for sure. So, as you know, we had a list of questions out for a day or so here, and people have voted on them. I think I've got them printed out in about the order that people were interested in. So we'll go ahead and launch into a few of them. And feel free to go off on any tangent at any time, tell stories, anecdotes, whatever, because people love to hear that stuff. So first one up was, when did you start getting into magic or mentalism, and what were some of your original inspirations to get into it?
Well, I was sort of born into the business. I started when I was literally 4 years old. That's when I learned my first set of magic, and I did my very first show when I was 5. Wow. So when I say born into the business, I mean I was right there. As soon as I could walk around and talk and be coherent enough for the magic trick, I was doing it. And my first show, I did a small set. I did cups and balls, the Chinese linking rings, and the Chinese sticks to an audience of about 200 people, which is pretty crazy.
At the age of 4?
At the age of 5, but I started practicing when I was 4.
Wow. Wow.
And it was all because of my father. He's into the entertainment industry. He's a variety entertainer and has done pretty much anything that he has ever wanted to do, even if he didn't know how to do it. Somebody says, "Can you do this?" He said, "Yes, absolutely," which is sort of the Carol Fox way of thinking as well. And my dad started doing clown, so he was a clown for a long, long time. He does excellent balloon artistry. He's been a square dance caller. He's done magic. He does Santa Claus. So a hodgepodge of literally anything is what my dad was doing. He also played in a folk band with my mother for many, many years. They had a trio that they would travel around with. And he also went around doing Thomas Edison school assembly shows all over the Midwest. So he would travel school to school and live out of a suitcase doing that, and did very well for himself doing all those things.
Wow, that is impressive. Wow, not too many people I've talked to have been born into a show business family, so that must have been a real inspiration.
Yeah, it was great. I have a weird memory which I usually try to keep quiet, but listeners will probably appreciate it in some sort of bizarre, macabre way. But when my father was doing his clown character, he would MC a show called the Farmington Kids Day every year, which is a big outdoor festival in the Metro Detroit area. It's focused around kids. And he would do one of the stage shows. And one year, when I was still small enough and ignorant enough to say yes to things, right, he dressed me up as a mini him in clown makeup. He was a goose clown. He had a derby hat, which is actually where my derby hat came from, for those of you who remember the Patrick Redford signature logo that's not on my head right now. It actually came from my father. That was his original clown hat that I continued to wear as sort of an homage to him and a thanks to him. But we had this giant shrinking machine, which was just a big red box that we put together with a dial on the front that said bigger and smaller, and I hid inside the machine, and he would drop things in, and they would either shrink down or grow bigger, and then at one point the machine would malfunction, and he would go around and get into the back, and the machine would shake and gyrate, and the dial on the machine would fall to smaller, and then I would come out of the machine as if he shrank. So it was a very cute, adorable. Thank goodness there's no video footage that I know of in existence or pictures today to incriminate me with, except for this story, which now you have.
That's a fantastic story. I love that. That's really terrific.
No, it's a bloody embarrassing story is what it is. But isn't that what this is about?
No, I think it's great. It's a family legacy. That's amazing. All right, so going down the list here, now not a lot of folks know you mainly for doing things that might be classed as mentalism, but we have a question of, do you only do mentalism or conventional magic as well?
I love conventional magic. When I perform and work for real people, I mostly stick to mentalism. I'll throw in a magic trick here and there, but even in my main show that I do, my platform show or my stage show, it's all mentalism. There's no magic in it whatsoever. Not that I think there's anything wrong with mixing magic and mentalism. I think that's great. I think people do it very, very well. But most of the magic that I do wouldn't be appropriate for the stage. It's mostly very intimate things, close-up stuff, coins, rubber bands. I think rope tricks play great on stage for some people. Matt King is obviously a great example of doing exactly that with ropes and cards on stage. An excellent job. He's one of the best shows that you will ever see. If you haven't caught him in Vegas, you need to go see him perform and see the show more than once. You'll surprise yourself at how much of the things that happen that look spontaneous are actually scripted and planned parts of the show, which is a good lesson for anybody watching magic. But no, it's mostly mentalism is the short answer to that question. But there are certainly, I guess this is a good way to segue, there are certainly magic tricks that I have invented that are out there on the market. I know Penguin has a few of them as downloads, but the majority of it I've just kept really to myself, just because in the market of selling stuff to magicians and mentalists, I'm known more for my mentalism, so there hasn't been a large demand for magic tricks from Patrick Redford, other than the mentalism tricks that I tend to gravitate towards and sell.
Right. Well, most of the magicians I know of mentalism, and even all when exploring your website was surprised to see how many effects you have there, and some of them quite creative, very interesting stuff.
And
Uh,
many of which have been retired. I don't know if you had a chance to check out the product vault as well. There's a link at the very bottom of the page where you can see all the things that are no longer available. Um, and I always surprise myself on how big that list is. And it's not because I want to keep things to myself. It's just because they lived their life as a product and they've stopped selling, so there's no need to keep them as inventory in my very feeble home here in Detroit.
that makes sense. You know, it's funny. Speaking of how early you started performing, which is uncommonly early. Always when we speak to someone who's a creator of magic, there's interest in how you got inspired to start that, and how early. Again, you said you began actually creating your own effects fairly young. How young were you, and what inspired you to begin creating effects?
Well, the very first thing that I created that was any good, and I probably created things before that just tinkering, which is actually one of the effects that is still available today. It's called Punching Angels. I was about 12 years old when I created it, and I remember Gregory Wilson, the other Gregory Wilson, was the first person I probably showed it to that was in my mind then, a big name magician. Not that he isn't a big name. And he loved it, and he encouraged me to work on it, and that was very nice of him then. And actually, we've become friends since then, and he has no recollection of that moment in time whatsoever. But I was at a convention. It was the Motor City Close-Up Convention that John Luca puts on almost every year here in the Metro Detroit area, and I wanted to show him this trick. And I remember I messed it up the first time because I was nervous and my hands were a little bit sweaty, and he was kind enough to say, "Don't worry, man, take your time. Everyone's watching. Not a big deal." Which is great. But it's a simple little thing with a rubber band and a business card and a couple of holes punched in it. And it was called Punching Angels because originally I used a playing card and decapitated the angels' heads for the hole placement in the cards, which I thought was a fun title. But there are other things. There's a few other things that aren't on market that have circulated underground, like a top pocket card control, which allows you to switch a card in your top pocket without anything else being in there. So you place the card into the pocket, someone else can reach in and pull out a different card. There's nothing else in the pocket. I published that on a private internet forum called The Second Deal, among other things like that in those mediums. So I've been creating a long time. I've been, but I tinker with things a lot, and that was one of the things growing up that I loved to do. You can see some of the titles behind me. This is a small fraction of the library I have, and I'm getting ready to move into a new house. Actually, I was just out looking to buy today, and I'm thinking, moving 2,000 books is not really a fun idea.
Right.
But about 2,000 of them here. And I'm only 30 years old. I turned 31 later this year, and I've accumulated quite a library. And I actually read the things. I don't just collect them. So they're not baseball cards to me. This is my research library, and I tinker with mostly everything in them at some point or another. And that includes magic. That includes mentalism. That includes psychological rogue techniques. Because I got a psychology degree when I was in college. I got my bachelor's in psychology, which is pretty meaningless, but it was a study that I, at the time, thought was interesting. And so I've collected all sorts of things, and I try to keep up on research, not just in magic and mentalism, but in what the world is doing and how the world is moving. Because I think all those things are important with our profession that we've chosen, is to be able to speak intelligently about what we're selling, and there's, believe it or not, a lot of crossover between reality and pretend.
Really, no kidding. It's funny, you mentioned that there's a natural segue, but someone asked if you had studied psychology, and so obviously...
I thought that question might come up. I noticed that it was amongst some of your other interviews that you folks have done.
Right. Well,
I got this is a fun story too. I got my bachelor's in psychology in college, and it was my Psych 101 class, my freshman year, all that time ago, and the professor was doing a talk on memory, and he told the class that it was impossible to make anyone forget anything, once it was locked into long-term memory. Once it's locked in, and you can't make someone forget. So after class, I said, "You're wrong. I'll buy you a cup of coffee if you come out with me, and I'll show you what I mean." So I made him forget playing cards. I made him forget his own name. I made him forget the color of his shirt, all within that small coffee meeting that we had. And he had me lecturing for his 500 level psych class later that month, where I did a full hypnosis show and talk for them, because I got my hypnosis certification when I was about 18 years old.
Wow.
And dabbled with that. So that was good fun, but it also made me question the program quite a bit, for them having a young kid come in as an expert. Which is one of the reasons I didn't move on, because most of the things that I'm interested in psychology-wise isn't the focus of most programs. And while a master's would have allowed me to focus wherever I wanted, it's not necessarily practical for the real world of work, or worthwhile for what I was going to choose to do with it. And I can study those things, and have studied those things on my own.
Right. I suppose it gave you an avenue to start that study, at least. Although I'm sure that you probably could have done it on your own without the college anyway.
Absolutely. And you know, a lot of the Prevaricator techniques that are on that project weren't initially called from real-world psychological sources, but independently discovered and share a lot to do with the way they actually interrogate people in the real world now. If you've read, actually, this is a great book. Let me grab it. These are all great books. Just over here, the Paul Ekman books. If you don't have this, it's Telling Lies by Paul Ekman. Great book. And he also has one on unmasking the face and emotions. All three great books, great reads. If you haven't done them, if you haven't read them rather, and you're into reading body language and reading people, those are must-have books. Paul Ekman was the guy that they based the TV show Lie to Me about. So the Lightman Group is actually based on Paul Ekman and his career, although there's a little bit of exaggeration, quite a bit of exaggeration on that show, but it's still a great show. And the main technique in Prevaricator shares a lot with the technique that Paul Ekman brought into the world of interrogations to figure out who is telling a truthful story and who's telling a lie or a fabricated one. And that has changed the very foundation of how a lot of people do interrogations now. Unfortunately, not across the board, but so on and so forth.
This is fantastic. You know, one of our key questions that we always have is what kind of books inspired you, and what ones do you recommend? So that's an excellent one. I mean, if you have any, I know myself, I'm going to be rewinding to make sure I get the right titles off of those and looking them up myself. Have you got any other great, books that you think that other magicians, mentalists could take great advantage of, things that inspired you?
One of my favorite things, because I get asked a lot how I create, where my inspiration comes from, and the answer is it comes from everything. It's not any one thing. But one of my absolute favorite things to do is I go to used bookstores all the time, and I go to the occult section. Not because I particularly enjoy the occult section of bookstores, but because commonly they will miscategorize things as occult. I found some great magic books in the occult section, or mentalism, written for magicians in the occult sections that have been miscategorized. But I also found a lot of pitch books written by people that you would have heard of. Right. For example, Dr. Hoy's pitch book. He had a pitch book, believe it or not, in hardcover. I think it was Entertaining ESP, or I have it somewhere on the shelf here. If I knew the question was coming, I would have familiarized myself with its location a little bit better. But also the Dunninger book. Dunninger had a great pitch book, which is still fairly easy to find. It's called What's on Your Mind, I believe, is the title of that. And the piece that a lot of people may be familiar with that I did on television about 10 years ago, inside an elevator. I would step into an elevator with someone off the street, and they would think of one of the floors in the elevator, and I would be able to control their thought. I would control them to think of a particular floor and push that button, and it's done twice in the clip. If you haven't seen the clip, it's on the George Tate Mind Tapped YouTube channel, And you can go to see it if you go to mindtap.com, which is my official website, which is under the name George Tate, not Patrick Redford, because it's the name I perform and work and live under. You can see it. You can see it all there. But inside the Dunninger book, there was a small paragraph on psychic experiments you can try with your friends. And one of them was when you step into an elevator, instead of calling out your number for the doorman or the elevator operator to press or take you to or lift you to, you would just think it and will that person to push that number or take the elevator to that point for you without actually saying anything out loud. And that, of course, was back in the days when there were operator elevators and people actually taking you up and down in massive groups. But that's what that piece was inspired from, was that mention in that book. There was another piece that I did called Light and Shadows, which was another piece directly inspired from that book, where we had a room full of different light fixtures, and I would step outside and the person inside the room would turn one of those lights off, and in real time with a split screen, again, this is a clip you can go see on my site, I'm able to sense or detect which light in the room and its exact location has gone off. And then interestingly, we switch places. So the person who just played the game with me, I'm going to now go in and turn a light off, and she is able to detect in real time and really do it which light has gone off in the room. And that was another thing inspired directly from that book. So I love reading those things because even if they don't have good methods, they have some really interesting plot lines. Another great book that I would suggest, which has some great plot lines and methods, is this one. And it has a very familiar fellow on the cover. It's called Mind Tapped Techniques to Control Minds. There's 75 different tips and tricks and real psychological mind games in this book that you can play with people. It's one of those things that I never really pitched towards the magic world, but there's some great stuff in here. And if you're a savvy reader, you will notice that there are great excuses for some covert operation alongside doing the experiments, completely honestly, if you so choose, just because of the way the conditions are set. So the savvy reader will pick up on that right away, which is kind of cool.
These are some fantastic resources, and you're also giving me perfect segues here. You mentioned George Tate a few times, and while people who know you will know the significance of the name, I thought maybe you could. One of our questions listed is what's up with Patrick versus George, and maybe you can tell people your reason for using two different names.
My real name is George Tate, believe it or not. I would say that's what I was born with. But Patrick Redford is a pen name. It is strictly a pen name. It is a fabrication that exists solely to make a distinction between when I'm on stage and what I'm doing for the magic community. Because when I was asked to do my first talk, oh man, almost 11 years ago now, to the day almost, I had to make a very important decision, and that was, do I want to go out and publish things as George Tate? So if these things became popular, and somebody types my name into Google, Google didn't exist back then, but you understand what I mean. Did I want a bunch of magic shops to come up, which is what comes up now when you type in Patrick Redford? My site is not first. Or do I want my site to come up? So I decided to make a separate thing. So Patrick actually is my name. It's my middle name. George is my first real name, and Redford comes from the city in Redford, Michigan, which is where I grew up for the first 13 years of my life, which is right here in the Metro Detroit area, not far from where I am currently. It's about 5 minutes outside of Detroit proper. But interestingly, my first name, technically, was James, which is my father's name. So when they got me home, they changed it to George because they didn't want two Jameses in the house. But James is actually my father's middle name. So we're just really kind of a messed up family. So the best way to think about it is George Tate is the guy that will always perform for you, and Patrick Redford is the, excuse my Detroit accent, the asshole who explains how it all works.
That's good. I like that.
My favorite has been, over the years, people have tried to out me online that Patrick Redford is really this George Tate guy. And I never thought it was a big secret, because I've never kept it as a secret. There's usually a reference to George Tate in every book that I've written. in the comic book series that I did, which was probably the other thing I'm most noted for were these comic books, which if you don't know, if you're not familiar with these, there's 5 of them, and you actually see the stuff performed on the page. This is a serial number divination that has become quite popular, and then it's explained in more traditional magic text. But there is a through storyline throughout the series of 5 books, and there are 5. I have them all here. This is pretty cool. There's the 5. And each one has a different focus, but there's a storyline that arcs throughout all of them, and the storyline of George, as in me, going after Patrick through time to get him to stop revealing secrets.
Oh, you're kidding!
Kind of novelty. And there's cameos from people that you would recognize, like Banachek is in there, Mark Salem's in there, Max Maven's in there, Matt King is in there, Carol Fox is in there, and tons of people. There's an Animan cameo that you will recognize and be familiar with, but there's a lot of other hidden stuff for people who are geeks like I am and enjoy, the cult classic films. There's stuff, and there's also in-jokes inside there as well. Doc Hilford has a repeating gag that goes throughout the series many, many different times. But there's references to Back to the Future and City of Lost Children, who's one of my favorite movies, and old TV shows like The Prisoner and Richard Diamond, Private Eye, Dick Tracy, things like that, Inspector Gadget, all of that stuff is there. So they're a fun read. Unfortunately, most of them are out of print. I know there are a few in circulation still in magic shops, so they're still obtainable. But I know my site itself only has a couple copies of the last one that we produced of the 5, which was Hexagon, which is a great book. In fact, I can show you something out of this if you'd like a little bit later.
Sure.
And I believe Heptagon is still available out there in the world, but I am out of them personally. And there's a few copies of Pentagon out there. I think there's about 60 copies left at the distributor, and the rest are they're gone. They sold out, and they sold thousands of copies, I'm happy to say. But rumor has it, even though I said I would only do 5 comic books, there has been a push to do more. So there are 2 more in the works, one of which will be very unique in that it will include an effect by someone else, because it shares a very similar property to an effect that I released, that allows you to make every star in the sky disappear in front of somebody's eyes and come back again. And it's a real-world method that's not hypnosis. And it's very cool, very practical, and very easy to do. And that will be coming out in hopefully soon. I don't know when. I don't have a date for it. And I wanted to show you guys some artwork, but I don't have the ability to share a picture over this thing. But maybe if I figure that out, we can do that a little bit later, too.
Okay. Now, when you raise the issue, the idea of an effect of inducing someone to see all the stars go out overhead,
yeah,
I'll have to mention to you a possible storyline to go with that. I don't know if you're familiar with an extremely famous short story by the science fiction writer Arthur C. Clarke, called The 9 Billion Names of God.
Yes, I am.
If you haven't, you should think of that one. I would maybe consider using that if I could do that to someone as a storyline. That was always one of my favorites. That's actually a good science fiction ghost story to tell around a campfire at night.
Nice. Well, I know we're not supposed to talk about methods.
Right.
And this is not the method we published, but this would be just as easy. You take a blindfold and you just cover their eyes and all the stuff. I'm kidding. That's not the method.
Yeah, that would work. Awesome. This is great. You have like a ton of fantastic material to talk about here. Definitely really love this. I'll tell you, let's see, we covered the question about Patrick versus George.
Yes.
Now, one of the things we often, pretty much always ask people who do mentalism, maybe the biggest maybe controversy, if you can call it that we see, and we see it over and over again in threads on the site, discussions about whether mentalists should disclaim psychic powers, whether they should, whether it's okay to claim psychic powers, should they say that they use psychology, body language, and NLP, or should they just say nothing at all about it and let the audience decide? So do you have a position on that? Everyone seems to.
Now you're asking me two different questions. One is what you claim, and one sounds like you're asking me about things like a disclaimer.
Yes, there's a lot of talk about both. In other words,
all right, well,
I guess the question boiled down is do you think people should disclaim psychic powers and should they claim anything at all?
Personally, I don't think a disclaimer does any good, because people unfortunately believe whatever they want, and I learned this very quickly. One of the things that I do is I give talks in colleges on thinking smart or critical thinking, and even up front, and I would do a mini version of my show in that talk, and even up front, saying, I'm going to do 15 minutes for you from my theatrical show. Whatever premise I throw at you, don't believe in this. Be skeptical. Rip it apart. These are magic tricks. Even with a disclaimer like that, at the end of those 15 minutes, almost everybody in the room says, not magic tricks, it's either psychic or psychological, which is a really interesting thing to me, to come out in a context of saying this is not real and encouraging people to not believe. They still do, and really seriously believe as well, to the point where they'll argue with me about it. So disclaimers really don't do anything, except they can do one thing, and that is they can be theatrically interesting. And I think that's the only good reason to use a disclaimer is when it's theatrically interesting. Because unfortunately, once somebody has made up their mind about something, they're not likely to change their mind about that something. And I don't think a theater show or an entertainment show is the place to try to get them to change their mind about that something. Now, what you choose to do with the power that you have in that position, that's a whole other story. That's where the ethics really come into play, is what you're doing with your powers. Are you claiming to heal people under false pretenses, either with a placebo effect or just bullshit and taking their money? Are you claiming to talk to their dead loved ones? Are you doing, there's so many darker sides of this coin that I personally would never do, and I don't personally agree with. But I know there's people out there that do that. I think that in this culture that we live in, there are people who are very happy to go into therapy and talk to a therapist. There's people who are very happy to go talk to their friends about what's bothering them. And there's people that are more comfortable talking to somebody who says they're psychic, whether or not they believe they are or not. And I think those are all legitimate forms of dealing with the world around you. And if it's not hurting anybody, great. But you can get into some pretty fuzzy territory.
Well, that's the nature of most of the discussions. Is a lot of it falls on the ethical side of, is it ethical to present yourself as a psychic and so on. On another angle of the same sort of question, there's a lot of discussion among mentalists also, and I've seen a lot written about the idea that even if you don't claim anything outwardly, that it's very important, some people feel, to have an internal silent script in which you understand yourself what powers you have and what powers you're using in order to accomplish these effects, and that if you don't have that, clear in your mind, then you have a problem with your presentation, or potentially do. And not everyone agrees that even that is necessary. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that idea, but whether you have.
I think it's important to decide what you're about on stage or when you're performing. Are you just an extension of yourself? Which I think being yourself is one of the hardest things to do, even though it's really hard to come up with somebody that's not yourself, because then you're going to have to figure out, do I live this character 24/7? Does that stop when I get off stage? There's some people who will not perform anything at all off stage outside of their theatrical environment, but they still maintain the same character. And then there's people who live it 24/7 that, I'm trying to think of notable examples here, like Uri Geller lives it 24/7, and who's to say he isn't psychic? I suspect not, but who's to really say?
Right.
And choosing what you can and can't do, I think, is important. I think if you are presenting a show that's not an exposure show, but a show that says none of this is real, I don't believe in any of these things, but let me show you some of them, then you can get away with doing multiple different powers in a show. You can bend metal, you can read minds, you can put thoughts in people's heads, you can do all of that. Personally, I've come up with some really cool metal bending routines. over the years, which I love, but I don't do them because they don't fit what I do on stage or who I represent myself as on stage. I love them. When I first started doing walk-around magic in restaurants, which is something that I cut my teeth on when I first started doing this more professionally, I did a fork bending routine that was 100% mine. It had a very interesting time bend that has never been on the market. It's never been published, and it's really, really good because there's none of this weird like shaking or gyration. You actually physically saw the tines just start straight and bend down slowly without any false moves. And it's something that I've hung on to, mostly because there is one optical principle that's involved that belongs to a dear friend of mine. And even though he has said, please go ahead and publish it, there's so much on metal bending out there already. There was a huge boom recently. I guess not so recently now. But with liquid metal, which was Morgan Strubler's product, and Patrick Cuffs had a product, and Banachek's psychokinetic silverware. There was just so much flooding the market from Guy Bavli to everyone else. The market didn't need another metal bending routine with silverware, and I still don't think it does. And I think it's also good to just hold some things back. But I have people to this day, 10, 12 years later, come back to me and say, I still have that fork that you bent. And they bring it to me.
Yep.
It's a very, very cool, it's a powerful thing that you can do for people, and it's a keepsake that they really do hang on to.
No, they really do. People are very impressed by that. I have had people come back with bent quarters from past experiences.
Absolutely. Yeah, I have another really good coin bend that will be coming out soon. Actually, you saw it at the Mind Jam, one of the coin bends that I've come up with. And again, it's something that I love doing, but it's not something I actually do in my professional repertoire. But I'll do it socially for friends. And it's a coin bend where you never touch their coin. It stays isolated in space in a napkin. So you fold up a cocktail napkin and you hand it to someone who's dropped their coin inside. You literally never touch the coin, and somehow they feel it bend through the napkin, through the material, and then it melts through the material, and they're left with the coin bent in their hands while you're completely removed. And that is just in my lecture, although it will be coming out on the Michael Murray Magic Box DVD, which is Mentalism from Blackpool, because that's where I first taught it, was there. And then it might appear somewhere else later as well, just in note form. There's three metal bending routines that may come out in the future from me.
Awesome. I'm just writing that down.
and the reason is, again, I don't get to do them in my professional repertoire, and I think someone should, because they're great spells, so to speak, and we should share our spells.
Yep. No, and they're a lot of fun. People really remember that stuff for a long, long time. So let's see. We have a couple of questions which I can sort of put together here because you've answered parts of them. But there's questions about what performers had great influence on you, or whether you had any mentors outside of self-teaching and books, or recent inspirations in mentalism. I guess that comes down to, one question of, are there people now or in the past who do mentalism that have inspired your style or your ideas in some special way?
I've been very, very lucky to have met some amazing people in this business over the years. And people that I grew up reading books, like Banachek, have become close friends. Rick Ma is a very, very dear friend, both in magic and outside of magic, and has been a very good mentor towards me, not so much in what tricks I've chosen to do or work on, but business-wise, he's been very good helping there, and just overall a great guy, great friend, and somebody that I love dearly. And then, people like Mark Salem befriended me fairly early on, and I remember going to see his show here in Detroit. He did a 3-month run when Detroit was apparently horribly, not doing very well on their legs. He came in and did sold-out shows for a solid 3 months at the Gem Theater here in town. And that's a huge inspiration, absolutely. And he does a great show. I love his show. And later I got to do some consultancy for him on that same show. Later on, once we had become friends, he called me up out of the blue and said, I read your book. Interesting stuff. I want to work with you, and we did. And that's happened quite a bit. And I got to work on the Andrew Main show recently, the Don't Trust Andrew Main, and I did the internet magic trick that launched with that show, where Andrew divines a thought of crush that the person sitting at home just thinks of, and they make up an imaginary date in the process, right down to the color that they were wearing, the location that they were, and what kind of drink they were both drinking. And Andrew gets all of them. So that was a fun thing to help invent as well. So yeah, I have lots of good friends that have done lots of good things for me. You know, I could name drop more, but there's no reason to. But I've been very fortunate to be able to talk to some really awesome big stars in the business.
Very cool, very cool. So let's see. You know, when actually the word business sparked another set of questions that again you have a couple of different sides to you, both as George and Patrick, performing and creating. Do you have any thoughts about how you get into how you market yourself, both as a performer on the one hand and as a creator on the other, to market effect? Whether you work with for performing, when you work with an agent or anything like that, or how do you get your name out there to get performance?
Sure.
And the other side, when you have an idea and you want to bring it to a product, at this point, is it just reputation that gets you there, or do you have to work with a production company of some kind to get that product out there?
I do all of the above in both sides of the coin. So when I am marketing an effect, that's a whole different story and probably the less interesting story. So we'll save that for the last thing that we talk about here.
Sure.
But in terms of real world work and how I've gotten it and how I maintain it, a lot of the work I do here has been repeat customers. I have a secret market that I've been working now for about 15 years, and it's something that I do in the summers here. Literally, I get hired back every year. I've been hired back every year for the last 15 years at multiple versions of these venues that I work here, which are big festivals that I work. And it's great. And those particular shows that I do, I don't have a website set up for. I mean, I have my MindTap site, and that is all about me. But these are very specialized shows that I do for them, and they literally have been booked by word of mouth, because one festival would say, I saw that act, I want that act, and I never had to create a space for it online. Which has been nice. And often when you have something good that's unique that no one else is doing, it just survives because it's a good product that people want. And that's something that isn't necessarily true of just a regular magic or mind reading show or mentalist show. Is they're a dime a dozen. There's so many of them out there already. What sets you apart? But as soon as you have something that's unique that people want, that other people haven't offered yet, and there have been other people who have copied the show, unfortunately, and have sold it and tried to steal my venues here, which is why I'm being a little vague about what exactly it is. That work will come. I've worked with agents over the years. Right now, I don't work with anyone in particular or rather, I'm not locked into anyone in particular. I freelance with a couple people, but most of the shows I'm booking myself, and I'm going out there and doing that. When I was working the college market more than I do now, I was working with an agency out of New Jersey, and they were booking that show, and they were helping front the cost of doing NACA and going through all those hoops that all of the college performers do. And it's hard work, it's grueling work, and sometimes it's life-sucking work. But that's the business side of show business, and unfortunately there's more business than show. And then on the other side of the coin, I've been very fortunate to have the opportunity to travel with Masters of Illusion, which is Gabe Blackstone's show, for about 1.5 to 2 years. I traveled with them, and I started doing close-up before the show in the lobby, and then eventually worked my way up to doing the main stage show and did my Mentalism set in that show. And I've worked behind the scenes on some big productions just based on reputation alone. I worked with the Illusionist show for a very brief amount of time as well before they changed over to their new 2.0 cast, and just all sorts of things. So there's really no one right way in for, unfortunately I can't say, here's a template, go do it. And that's what I was always looking for, and still look for, is somebody to say, here's the easy system. And there's people who claim to sell you an easy system of booking yourself. And they're all pretty much the same. And unfortunately, none of them are actually going to work, because no one can sell you better than you. Because nobody knows you and your show better than you do. And if you're selling you, you do a pretty good job. If you're selling a generic magic show, you have a lot of competition. And that is where the trouble starts to kick in.
That's fantastic advice. You know, I tell you, a lot of people are really going to value hearing that, because this is, you know, maybe more than about tricks and presentation. People are a lot of questions back and forth about how do I get myself out there, how do I get booked. So that's really, really valuable. How about,
yeah, and think of it this way. I live in the Metro Detroit area, and while I don't work in Metro Detroit area, you know, the majority of the year, and I travel as much as I can, I still live in Metro Detroit, which, economically speaking, is not the thriving metropolis it once was. It's actually coming back quite a bit. It's a beautiful town. If you can come visit, please look me up. Please say hello. You're always welcome on my front door. Most of you. Some of you are not. I'm kidding. Everyone's welcome. But it's a beautiful, beautiful city. There's a lot of good things going on here, and it's been great to watch the city go from being pretty much dead to very, very thriving very quickly. And I'm out here shopping for a new house. I live in a condo right now, but I'm looking for a house, and the market is horrible in the sense that things are selling very quickly and going up in price very quickly. So this area is booming, which is great.
That's good. That's good news to hear. It obviously hasn't been the picture for a while there, so that's nice to hear.
Yeah, well, the thing with Detroit, it's an artist community. It really is. There's a circus school here or two. There's an aerial school. There's a trapeze school, which are kind of the same thing, but not. There are many, many acro studios. Or if you're not familiar with acro, it's the two-person sort of yoga that you'll see a lot in Cirque du Soleil. And this area really is thriving with artists, both performance artists and photographers, painters, and so on and so forth. And lots of entrepreneurs in the area as well that are bringing business into Detroit and building new buildings and bringing their companies in. Fortune 500 companies, there's tons of them here as well. So there's a lot of opportunity in this city, and a great one, a huge one, which has always been part of the struggle for Detroit. But we're not here to talk about Detroit, are we? We're here to talk about...
No, that's definitely interesting to hear. You know, again, also in terms of we're talking about your performing side, George, since you do travel around a bit, is there any place if people want to see you and they don't live in Detroit or
Sure.
in the area, is there a way for them to find out do you have a calendar of appearances any place on your website or anything?
I don't keep a calendar, but if they go to the mailing list that I have, that's a sign-up list on the top, just like at patrickredford.com, there's one at mindtap.com. They can throw their email into the system, look at email on wherever I am. I also try to keep Facebook up to date. I am not the best person at social media. I actually suck quite a bit at social media, just keeping track of it, because I have multiple pages. I've got George Tate, I've got Patrick Redford, and so on. My cat has a more maintained Facebook page than I do, which is crazy, because I have nothing to do with it, so I don't know how she does it. It's a weird thing.
That's a good trick.
But I'm one of the worst people in that regard. So and luckily, most of the things I do, other people have promoted them much better than I did. Something I did when I was in college, I went to Eastern Michigan University, which is Ypsilanti is actually where Hank Morehouse used to live back in the day, before he moved to White Dove and before he passed away, unfortunately. But Ypsilanti had a couple of storefront theaters that I would use as my testing grounds for material and shows. And when I say storefront theater, I mean it sat, or was supposed to seat, about 50 people, no more, no less. They had church pews set up and a platform with a nice backdrop, and I would go and workshop material there. So I'd come up with something new, I would write it into a show, and go do the show there. And I was doing all the promotion work for that. I was flyering, papering the town, blasting it on the social media. Facebook hadn't quite gotten its traction back then yet. It was MySpace mostly at that point. And going out and tapping into the email list and going in to all my friends and saying, hey, there's a show, come see it. And we would usually sell out those 50 seats with standing room only, which was great to hear. I also did quite a few seances in that space and spaces like that around the same time period.
Awesome. Okay. You know, you mentioned getting onto your mailing list and having noted the mailing list on your Patrick Redford site, which again is slanted towards magicians. You made a mention that if you go onto the MindTap site, there's a separate mailing list there if you want to see about performances.
Absolutely.
And so we're gonna publish links to both of those sites in the comments thread before we're done here, or when we're done here. And I will also note that for magicians and mentalists who are interested in your material, I noticed a note that if you sign up on the Patrick Redford site for that mailing list, that you may get a freebie thrown your way once in a while.
Yeah, usually I release something free, which is it's either a product that's in development or a piece of a product that's already out. And I usually do that around my birthday, sort of my own birthday gift to everyone who's signed up. And my birthday's in October, so sometime in October I usually throw something free out there as well.
Not October 2nd, is it?
No, it's October 14th, but nice guess.
There you go. Well, let me guess. That's my birthday, the 2nd. So anyway, I was just figuring.
But some of the things that we've done in the past, there was part of the Ninja Tossed Out deck system I released for free. There was the rock, paper, scissors manuscript, part of that I released for free before it became a full-blown product. So there's definitely reasons to sign up just for the freebies. And I don't go out there and blast a lot of messages, only because I'm busy. I don't even have the Ninja Tossed Out deck up on my website. And that's been out now for a little while. It debuted at Blackpool and has sold incredibly well, I'm happy to say, through the other magic shops and whatnot. But the only people that were able to purchase that were the people on the mailing list directly through me. You can get it in tons of stores, but there's also a blast that happened before everyone else could get it. You could get it through the mailing list, and that was about 5 months before it became an official product in the world. And it's never been on the website, and those people saved a bit of money as well. So it's a good thing. I try to give back to anybody who's willing to support me and pay attention to the Patrick Redford line through the Patrick Redford website. So it's a good thing to be on, is the short answer. The non-exhaustive answer.
As I said, I noticed it this morning, so I'll be looking forward to your emails anytime. And I think I'll go on the MindTap as well in case I get a chance to see if you're going to be in my area.
Yeah. It needs to be revamped a bit, and we're in the middle of doing that before that new site goes live. My look has changed over the last few years. I've dropped the hat from my performances for the most part. The character is growing up. So it was time to walk away from the derby hat, although I still use it as a logo and I still use it within some of the shows that I do. I just don't wear it during the show anymore.
Right. Going beyond appearances for performing and marketing your product, again, I was very privileged to be in your lectures at the East Coast Mind Jam this year, your lecture and your master class, which was a wonderful experience. In your I don't know if it's just correct to say you have a lecture circuit, but in your lecturing business, do you do that frequently, and do people on the mailing list get notices of that as well?
I don't go out on a lot of lecture tours, only because I don't have the time for them. It's a lot of driving for not a lot of money, unfortunately. Okay. So the guys who are out there lecturing, please go support them. Please buy stuff from them. Make sure you buy stuff from them, because they're not getting a lot of money per lecture to be out there, and it costs a lot to drive across the country from space to space and live out of a suitcase and go through that. So I commend anybody who is doing that still, and there's some really good guys out there on the road doing that. I do it occasionally. I did a Midwest tour and an East Coast tour a number of years ago, about 2 or 3 years ago now, and I've done some spot lectures here and there, but most of the appearances I've done have been conventions, only because You know, I'm not in this. I'm not in the lecturing business. I'm in the performing for real people business. As much as I love lecturing, I love sharing magic with people. And usually my lectures run 3 hours or more if people are willing to listen. Because there's so much that we can talk about, and there's such a incredible catalog of material to pull from. But also when a group really wants to talk about the psychology behind things and why we're making the moves that we're making and why we're doing what we're doing, I love talking about that. It's one of my favorite subjects when people are seriously wanting to sit down and break an effect apart instead of just figuring out how mechanically it works, because there's so much more to everything than just the rote mechanics of it. I love doing that, and I love the opportunity to do that. Unfortunately, that's not the magic culture that we live in, because we want it all now, and we want it all quickly, and then we want to move on to the next thing. And that's fine. That's just not for me.
Well, as I said to you, having sat in 3.5 hours this past March in New Jersey, focusing mainly on Prevaricator and witch hand techniques, that I took. I happen to have it here. I had my own copy of Prevaricator on the shelf for maybe a year and a half before I watched it. I was intrigued by it, but I never quite had the, I don't know if it's confidence, how to say it, to actually start doing it on people. And I haven't done it a lot, but your 3-hour lecture was awesome. I came out of that, even outside of Prevaricator, just with some of your other techniques, witch hand, and some things you did with selecting coin off a table and so on.
Mm-hmm.
I came out with more usable material and insights in that 3 hours than any other lecture I've ever been to, I think. And so that was
the cool thing about those workshops, and for those of the folks listening out there that don't know what Prevaricator is, it was a project that we put out as a booklet in 2004, which was just a very basic technique at the time, because we sort of rushed it to market before we were ready to really release everything, on being able to detect who's hiding an object amongst 2 or 3 people by either asking them no questions at all or asking them just one question, which was, do you have the object? And one of them got to lie or tell the truth, or sometimes they both got to lie and both got to tell the truth, depending on how you wanted to play the game. And it got a tremendous response. Many people loved it. Many people started doing it. And we started doing workshops, and by we I mean me and Patrick starting to do these workshops across the country, and I had a workshop booklet written up that later became the Prevaricator DVD, and now there's even more material out there. But it wasn't just who has the object, it's being able to define what hand that object was in, which one of up to 5 people had that object. You could technically do it up to an infinite amount of people if you really wanted to. We talked about that in the workshop that you sat in on as well. But the workshops themselves have been great because I recently started doing them again. I've only done a handful of them in the past. One was at the North Tyneside Convention back in 2009. I've done the Mind Jam. I've done a few private workshops alongside the lecture tour that I did a few years back as well. And I'm sure there have been others that I'm just notable ones I'm not recalling at the moment. But after 10 years of working on Prevaricator or working with Prevaricator, I feel like I finally know how to teach it. And I know how to teach it well. Not to say the DVD doesn't teach it well. It does. The DVD is really a groundbreaking, wonderful thing within Magic because of the practice rooms that we have that are literally split screens, so you can do all the facial and body reading that you need to do. You've seen the DVD. You can verify this. And it has been called one of the best body reading courses on the market today, and not just within Magic. So I'm thrilled for that. I think that's great. And the Prevaricator workshop itself does not just focus on that old, somebody hide the object, let me ask you questions, and I'll tell you who has it. It's really a whole collection of techniques on being able to do a lot of different things, from somebody just imagining holding an object and being able to tell them what hand that object is in and what that object is that they're imagining, to having 4 objects on a table, everybody grabs one and mixes them up. Well, your back is turned and you're able to identify which object is with which person. And some of these use just psychological methodology, and some of them use a little bit of more conjuring technique behind them. Some of them use a blend of everything, and it's knowing what tools to work with at what time. So like I say throughout that workshop, once you know one thing, you usually know everything. And you always know where you're going to start. You always know where you're going to end. You're just prevaricating everything in between, which is where Prevaricator gets its name. So it's a lot of fun, and those folks who have bought the project and worked with the product but haven't gone out and done it in the real world, like you said, you really just have to get the courage to go out and do it, because it's actually a lot easier than you think it is, especially when you have all those secret tools back there to keep you company as sort of a fail-safe safety net, some of which in the workshop that aren't on the DVD, and most of them that are.
I think understanding the fail-safes was something that came from the class, and that is, like you say, the kicker. But I'll tell you that the first time I went out and tried it, and it was as clear as day what I needed to do, and I think my jaw practically dropped as much as the audience's did, so it was very effective.
That's always fun when that happens, isn't it?
Fantastic material. Fantastic material. Very insightful, but it makes you think a lot. It's much more, you come out thinking a lot more about things than just, oh, it's a great effect.
Absolutely. And you know, there's a really cool thing happening right now in mentalism. And there's a lot of focus on doing things for real, which goes back to the Ormond McGill's days, because a lot of his stuff was doing it for real. And then we sort of fell into a lull in terms of the history of things being published, of faking everything. And I love that people are taking chances. Folks like Peter Turner are coming up with some really interesting techniques to doing things for real. A lot of these techniques that Peter pulls from are, you know, techniques that existed and were published by Ormond McGill that are now getting a new energy breathed back into them again, which is fantastic.
Right, right. Peter has obviously brought a lot of excitement to this whole area, and it's been amazing to see some of the things he's been doing.
Absolutely.
Down my list here, we've got answered for 90% of what we've got here. A couple of things again about performing simple questions. There's one of how do you select effects for a performance and develop your routines. I guess, you know, connected to that too. This is one thing that occurred to me. If you perform some of those festivals that you work with, and you find yourself performing for the same venue again periodically, do you tend to perform the same act, or do you introduce new things each year just because you're introducing them, or do you?
Well, one of the advantages of performing in a festival market is the people are forever changing.
Right.
Which is great. So my act has developed over the years, but includes much of the same things, but I've added to it little by little and perfected it little by little. But I always try to include something new, and I'm always tinkering. So it always is fresh feeling, and when I step out on the stage, hopefully it's like I'm doing those things fresh for the audience, as if it's all of our first time going through them, so it's still exciting, and I'm not just going through the motions. You got to see at the Mind Jam a portion of the show that I've been doing, and that opening thing that I did with the envelopes and the 4 people, which is kind of like a chair test where 4 people mix themselves up, and then I've predicted the right order ostensibly. Technically, they're reading my mind. And the last bit that I did with the object in the box that 3 or 4 people divined different parts of, and then became an actual physical thing. Those are some of the oldest effects that I've came up with that I'm still doing today, 10, 12 years later.
Right.
Hopefully they still play fresh, even though I've done them hundreds upon hundreds of times. Hopefully I'm still able to do that as if, you know, this is amongst the first few times that I've done them. And that's hard to do. You know, I hope that I never become one of those people that are just going through the motions on stage because it's become just work and because I have to be there. And while I do have to be there, especially I guess I could go back to school and choose a different career path, but at this point I've been doing it long enough that would be trickier to do. So at this point, I have to do this. I have to do what I'm doing, but I don't want it to feel like that when I'm out there doing it.
Right. Well, I mean, you have a great deal of enthusiasm comes across both as a lecturer and as a performer. So I don't think hopefully you don't have that problem. Either that or you're a very good actor. So
might be a bit of both.
a little bit. Well, you can't be on every.
I will share this bit with you. I used to suffer very, very badly with an anxiety, having anxiety attacks, and it wasn't stage fright. It was actually getting very, very anxious, which I guess is technically stage fright. But before I would step out on stage, but it wasn't because I was performing that would make me anxious. It was all sorts of things. And one of the things I did to battle that is I changed my diet. I became vegan. I was vegetarian prior to that, and I became a full-fledged vegan, and have been doing that now for 8 or 9 years. I think this is my 9th year as a vegan, and it's worked really, really well to keeping everything in check and keeping me a lot cooler on stage. I know that some people listening to this or who might listen to this might remember me back from the early Mindvention days. In the first lecture I did at Mindvention, I had an anxiety attack before I stepped out on stage because of a phone call that I had to take right beforehand. And people thought that it was stage fright, that I was uncomfortable being in front of a group of people because they came up and said, you know, we could tell you were so nervous in the beginning and then we saw you visibly calm down throughout. And it's because I was not calm in the beginning, but it wasn't because of what I was doing. It was because of things that happened before. And it's interesting just to hear people who saw me then versus now saying, you're so much more comfortable on stage now. And little do they know it had nothing to do with being on a stage or not, because I've been on stages all my life. It just would depend on everything else going on, or what wasn't going on, and being okay with it or not being okay with it.
Right. I'll tell you, this is kind of funny because I have to tell you that my wife is sitting in a chair right across from me here listening to this. She met you also at the Mind Jam briefly. I don't know if you recall. But the second.
Hello.
Yes.
Why is she not there with you? Why is she not doing this interview?
She probably should be. She could do part of it because at the very moment you said that the biggest change for you was changing to a vegan diet, she turned in her chair and pointed at me and gave the expression, "You see." My wife is vegan.
Is she vegan?
Yes.
Yeah.
Hi, nice to see you again.
That's my wife, Chris. I don't know if you recall her, but everyone else.
On all of these. Just get rid of him. We don't need him anymore.
Okay, I'm leaving.
Yeah, well, we'll do the vegan talk now.
Okay, great. So, recipes, if you go to theveganpotluck.blogspot.com, you can see my vegan recipe blog that I have.
Okay, well, we'll do that.
Yeah.
We'll do that.
So we'll swap recipes later.
At the risk of losing our core audience. That's
no, okay, back to magic,
I'll tell you, I enjoy cooking and eating this way. I'm just not a convert myself, and luckily I don't have too much of an anxiety problem. But no, that's a fantastic.
It's wearing you down, I can tell.
Oh, well, she'll tell you I cook vegan very, very well. I'm not all the way there. That's all. So I think we nailed most of the questions on the list, and you really hit a lot of tremendous stuff here. I did. You mentioned, I don't know, maybe this is a good segue. You mentioned me bringing a couple of things with me today and having them with me. And
well, let me get my glasses on here.
Want to do something like that?
So that I can see.
I love that.
Do you prefer these glasses or is the monocle? I was playing with this look, trying to figure out which I should go with.
I thought the Mark Salem impression was pretty good too.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. For those of you who have not seen the Mark Salem impression, let me get into character here. Hold on.
Impression.
It's only me.
My wife walked away, but I'll show her this later in recording.
Oh, I also have, because Detroit is now like Hipsterville.
Right.
We have the hipster impression.
That's good.
Actually, that's my Brandon Queen impression, for those of you who know Brandon. Okay, enough of that junk. No, I wanted to try something with you because one of the things with the comic books that sort of put them on the map, there's at least one in almost all the comics, not all of them, but stuff you can do remotely over a telephone or over a webcam for people. And I know that I asked you to get like your ring, a watch, and a wallet involved. You have those with you now?
I do, in fact. I've got a wallet.
All right, here's what I'm going to ask you to do is you're going to keep them off camera, just below the camera line, so I can't see them, so
All
we
right.
can still talk freely and everyone at home can still see us and experience this as we're experiencing this, but I won't be able to cheat and see what you're doing. But in front of you, if you'll put your ring down on the desk in front of you, or the table, or whatever you're working on, and then right of that, put your watch if you have your watch, and to the right of that, your wallet, if you can do that for me.
Okay, so ring on the left, watch.
Yep, ring, watch, wallet.
Yep.
Just so they're laid out there so you can see them and work with them.
Correct.
Fine. Now, I obviously know what order they're in currently because we just talked about it.
Yeah.
So take any two of them and just swap their places. So you're going to take two objects and switch the places of those two things with each other.
Okay.
And there'll be one that you haven't moved yet. Pick that up and swap that with one of the other two.
Okay.
So they're in a brand new order I couldn't possibly know.
That's correct.
I don't know how to be any more fair than that.
That's right.
Here's what we're going to try to do. And again, try to keep this below the camera.
Yes.
But I want you to pick up the first object to your left, keep it below the camera line, and place that on your wrist.
Okay.
Just set it on your wrist. Does that feel strange to you?
I suppose.
I mean, you don't have to tell me what it is, but it feels a little bit strange.
Yeah, I would say that feels a little strange.
Just go with me on this for a second. I know it doesn't seem right, but this should be exactly what I want to happen. Take the next one, whatever's now in front of the line. I want you to pick that up and place that. Yeah, place that into your pocket, if you would. Place that in your pocket.
This is the object that was in the center a moment ago.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, place that in your pocket. And whatever the last object is that's still on the table,
Yes.
place that onto your finger.
Any particular hand?
Same hand that you put the other thing on your wrist, if you
Correct.
could.
We've got it.
Does that still feels a bit strange though, doesn't it? Doesn't feel right, does it?
Now.
But it is right, because if all went correctly, you should have your wallet sitting on your wrist, your watch on your finger, and your ring in your pocket.
We've got it.
Can you show them? Can you tilt your camera down and show? Oh, that works too, which is a little bit weird. Do you want to do this again?
Want to do it again? Okay, this is in my
Again,
pocket.
put your ring down, your watch, and your wallet right there in line. Ring, watch, wallet.
Ring, watch, wallet.
And this time you're gonna switch them again. So pick up any two and do it differently this time than you did last time.
Sure.
But pick up two, trade places with them, and then take the last thing you haven't moved and switch that with one of the other two. So they're in a brand new order that I couldn't possibly know again.
That is
and different from last time. So this is so random. There's no way that I could even know where everything is.
Yes.
And just so you know that this was not a fluke, I'm going to do the exact same thing again and put the objects exactly where I just put them. Ready?
Yes.
Pick up that first object. Okay, yeah, slide that onto your finger. Good, done that, and then pick up the next object, put that on your wrist, and of course the ring should still be on the table. Put that in your pocket. So you again should have the watch on your finger, the wallet on your wrist, the ring in the pocket again.
Very nice. Yes.
I don't know how to be any more fair than that.
That's pretty good. That's nice.
It's a great trick. It's easy to do. It's impromptu, and obviously you can do this without asking any questions. But it seems so fair, so random, and it's really hard to back engineer as well. It's a lot of fun. I encourage folks to do that. And if they do want to do that, that was in the book Heptagon Plus. Is the one with the spider on it with my hat. Looks like that. And it was called. Oh wait, no, I'm sorry. That's completely wrong. It's in this book. It's in Hexagon.
Hexagon.
And it's called. I'm sorry. I should know where my own damn tricks are. It's called Ring Watch Wallet, and you can see the artwork is just gorgeous on this.
Yep.
And this page doesn't tell you anything on how to do it. But there's also a cameo from Alan New at the bottom. That's Alan. Because this was inspired by one of his effects that he put into print years ago, which is good fun. You've got some index cards there as well.
Yeah, actually I do.
Okay, we're gonna try this. I think I've got a business card and I've got some plastic party cups. Or should I use a wine glass? I don't know which I should use. I guess the party cups will be fine. I'll use the wine glass. You'll actually be able to see everything better that way.
Okay.
And I'll leave that sort of like this, and I'll get to that in just a second. I'm going to keep this in full view if I can,
Sure.
just so there's no weird, like, editing stuff going on there at home.
Right. Okay.
But what I want you to do is just get...
3 cards.
Oh, perfect. Perfect. I'd like you to get a few words in mind. Since you have 3 cards, 3 words would be ideal. But keep them short, just for the sake of time. 3 letters, 3-letter words would be good. Something like ask might be a good word, but don't go for ask. Obviously, settle on your own. And once you have those 3 words, I want you to write them, one on each of those business cards.
Okay.
And I'm going to do just 1 word on this business card. I'm going to wait for you to finish yours. And I'm just trying to keep an eye on you, but I can't see what you're writing for the record.
That's
this
correct.
Is all happening off camera?
I'm done. I've written them.
Okay, so you've gotten a few words in mind.
Yes.
You've written the 3 words down, and you've kept them 3 letters or less? Yes?
Yes.
All right, cool. I'm going to decide on a 3-letter word as well. Let me just write this off camera like that. I'm going to fold this up and place that there. So it can't be manipulated at all. So here's the game. I would say do this with conscious thought, but then I might be able to influence you into one thing in particular. And so far, hopefully, you don't feel influenced much at all. But mix up those 3 cards.
We're mixing.
And I want you to decide on one of them, any one of those 3 words that you want.
Okay.
Drop the other 2 on the table and just hold whatever that word is. Got it?
Yes.
Free choice? Oh, you don't have to show me yet. I don't know if you're showing me at all.
I'm showing you the cards. No, it's facing away from you.
Okay, good. You don't have to show me yet.
No.
Let me tell you a bit of the process that I was trying to do with this. Is A, when you limit people to going for just 3-letter words, there's only so many 3-letter words out there. Number 1.
Correct.
2, there are common things that people tend to gravitate towards. Animals are one of those things that they gravitate towards. Dogs, cats, etc., etc., etc. When you were mixing them up, let me just ask you this. Did you mix them and decide on something randomly, or did you mix them and then choose something with purpose?
I mixed them and then chose something with purpose.
That's what I thought you probably have done. Do you have pets at home?
Yes.
Do you have a cat at home?
Yes.
Is that what you went for?
Yes.
Because this is exactly what I went for, and hopefully they'll be able to see this. I can't see your card,
No.
but hopefully you can read mine.
Yes. You got it.
Now, in case you think that's a fluke, I will rip this up. We'll do it one more time. You still have 2 other words there, yes?
Yes, I do.
Let me grab. I'm grabbing another one. I will do. Let's pre-fold it. It's just easier to do that way. Let's try this. This time, mix them face down. And if you can see through the page, if it has bled through at all,
Right.
kind of look away as you're mixing.
So I'm not supposed to know which is which.
Yeah, I don't want you to know what's what this time.
Wait a minute, I have my wife next to me, sitting next to me.
Consciously. This time I want it to be random, and I'm going to stick that right there underneath the wine glass, just so I can be super fair about this.
That sounds good. I'll tell you what, I handed the 2 cards to my wife sitting next to me, and she mixed them while I wasn't looking.
Okay, great. Have her hand you back either one.
Either one. Hold on a second. She doesn't know what they are either. She just handed me one.
Great. So this was just a random choice on your part of either one of those two words that you just pulled out of your head earlier.
Yes, actually my wife's choice this time.
Your wife's choice. Well, technically it was both of your choices
Yeah,
because we both have made decisions
yes,
here.
correct.
So for the first time, I don't know if we'll be able to read it at home, but look at it and read it and tell us what it says. For the first time, what word is that?
The first time the word is bat. B-A.
Bat. And I want to be very fair about this, and I'm going to keep talking so the camera will stay on me, because I don't know the tracking of that, but I do want to lift this and be very fair that this is the only thing there, and it really does say.
Whoa.
Very good.
Which is kind of cool.
Very good.
So yeah, these are things that are sort of on the creative block at the moment that I've been toying around with.
Very nice. Very nice. Very, very nicely done.
Yeah, it's good fun. Good fun. Other than that, what else do you want to talk about?
What's on the third card?
It's not important what's on the third card.
Okay, we won't bother then. Sorry. Very nice. I like that very much. And you're working on that right now, so it's something in development, but maybe we'll see a mention about that one of these days.
Probably will appear some. I sit on things a really long time before I release them.
Right.
So these are all things that I've sort of been playing with. And to lend credence to that, the Ninja Tossed Out deck that was recently released at Blackpool that has sold really, really well, sold out at Blackpool and has sold well since then, that was one of those things that I came up with 10 plus years ago that I've been sitting on for a long, long time and perfecting and refining and so on. I don't like rushing things to the market. And this is actually the question I never did answer that I sort of sidestepped earlier on marketing magic and what to choose to bring to market and what not to choose. That I don't rush things to market. I like things to actually work for people and not just be things that I've thought up that might work. You know, I've certainly been guilty of that for stuff that I've thrown into my own show and stuff that we did for the Mind Tap show as well on television. There were some of those pieces that we slotted days and set time aside for that I had no idea how I was going to pull them off until about 10 minutes before the camera started rolling sometimes. But I've never been one to release something into the magic community that wasn't a method that I've actually done and worked on for at least a little bit of time before bringing it to market. A couple years ago at Mindvention, I was showing off this thing with a business card that you could put underneath the glass and it would jump or flip over without the use of string or magnets or anything like that, which I still haven't officially released because I'm still tinkering with it. There is a chair test booklet that I put out called Ensconce Fundament Asunder Maximus, which is long out of print. But there have been, that one I think contained 5 different chair tests at the time, but I have since invented over 20 different chair tests, many of which have never officially seen mainstream print. By that I mean some of it's appeared in lecture notes or been swapped privately amongst friends or has appeared in other people's show that I designed it for, but it hasn't officially been out there because I'm still tinkering with them. Although, hopefully, and I hate committing to a release date, but hopefully within the next year or two, those will finally be released in a large book of chair tests, which will be the first hardback book release that I do, because most of my stuff has been perfect bound, or actually that's not true. This is hardback book, but the first hardback Patrick Redford release that I'll do, and it's called Chairs and Other Formations, which will be both chair tests and predicting the order of objects that have been arranged on a table or objects that are held onto by people. One of those things has been in the Prevaricator lecture that you got to see back at the East Coast Mind Jam, and things like that have been circulating in places but haven't been available to the mass consumption of the mentalism and magic community. So that's just the way I sort of approach things. Plus, it's always good to try to find out, has someone else done this before, right, or has someone done similar things before, and also researching the history of it. One of the reasons I've ended up with so many books in my collection is I'll be working on an effect, and I want to research where that has come from. Even if I independently thought up some of the methods myself, I still want to go back as much as I can and reference whoever I can, and hopefully correctly. There's a lot of misinformation in magic on where these techniques started, the history of these techniques, where they have gone, where they're going, and where they've been. And so if I find that somebody has worked on the same plot, I will get my hands on as much of that material as I can, and a lot of it which ends up being absolutely horrible and wretched, and some of it that's great. And try to be as honest as I can, so I'm not... What is going on over there?
I'm sorry. I'm talking to my wife.
Oh, okay. Very quietly, I might.
You can see me, but nobody else can.
Sorry. So I can. You just threw me off my train of thought there.
That's
but
really
so
fun. You see, that's
that I can be honest as possible in terms of crediting and the history of where things come from, because I'm as much interested in the history of magic as I am creating and performing it.
Awesome, awesome. A lot of your material, I think I told you earlier that I went through, and sorry for distracting you there. No one else but you could see me. I didn't mean to do that.
I wish they could have, because all I saw was
a lot of gestures.
I don't know which one of us they can see at this point. I think I have to.
I'll explain it later. At any rate, going through your site, I noticed so many great-looking effects that really interested me, and you had a lot of them out there. So several of them, I thought I would at least mention. You talked about having worked with, I think, a psychologist or your psych professor, perhaps. You said, it's impossible with long-term memory to erase someone's memory, and you went out and did it to them. I noticed. I don't know how to pronounce this. How do you pronounce Glemme?
Glemme. The product. Yes, Glemme. It's a Norwegian word that means to forget.
Yeah. Okay. Oh,
there was a period of time when I thought it was really fun to name things with really archaic names, and by archaic I just mean bizarre, strange, unusual, and off the beaten path.
Right.
And so one of the first things I ever published was called diapason, which is a music term. It's really not that strange or unfamiliar of a word to people who are in music, but diapason to most people is what the hell does that mean? And it just means an entire range of instrument and voice. And there was another product called mendacity. Then there was consecution, ensconce fundament, all these crazy names that are too smart for their own good, unfortunately, but names that I enjoyed. Oh, look at the cat. This is the first time I'm seeing the cat, so I'm...
Actually, yeah, we thought
great.
The cat wanted to know how you picked her out of the list.
I'm curious. I don't know the cat's name, right?
No.
Let's try this. So there's a game in this book, and I talk about it in this book, about how just getting the first letter of something
right
will often inspire the rest of it.
Okay.
So without telling me the first letter yet, if you told me the first letter of your cat's name, are there a lot of things that start with this? Would it give it away instantly, do you think?
A lot of cat names?
Whatever your cat's name actually is, would the first letter give it away?
I don't think so.
Okay. What is the first letter? Just the first letter.
First letter is L.
L. L. Oh, good. You can see that on the camera. I'm gonna make a guess. How many letters? 5 or 6?
6.
6. Okay. Probably.
This may be a trick.
This is going to be my guess. Ooh. Hopefully I didn't just erase it. That's my guess. I'm going to throw that over there as well so I can't change it. That's my guess, and I'm going to try to keep this in full view because I don't want people to think I'm switching junk around.
I'm worried for you. This may be a difficult one.
I'm hoping I'm close. What was the name?
The cat's name is usually associated with a dog. This cat's name is Lassie.
Lassie?
Yep.
Is that with an I-E?
Yes.
Well, I did it with a Y like that. But
Awesome. Very good. Now I'm really impressed. Very good.
Lassie.
Very good. She just ran away. I just scared her to death there.
That's okay. She'll thank you. She'll thank you later.
Very nice. Very, very nice. That was terrific. Now I'm really glad that we brought the cat up on the table.
And we honestly, that's not something we planned. We didn't talk about that beforehand.
No.
That was really spontaneous. True.
I will tell you, however, that the cat being on the table wasn't, because the cat jumped on my wife's lap over there, and previously I was saying, "Bring me the cat. Bring me the cat."
Oh, that's what this was.
That was about, because I figured, what the heck, it was kind of funny, because cat was the word that I was thinking that you came up with. So that was very impressive. So I'm fascinated again, like I said, by Glenn, who's the.
Oh yes. I'm sorry. We talked all about that, but didn't talk about it at all.
That's why I interrupted you with the cat business. But in addition to that, you have a more recent item. I noticed you have a Killer Magazine book test out.
Yes, I do. That is
relatively new.
It is kind of new. It's been around a little while. It's something I worked on for about 2 years before I released it. And it's gotten an interesting response, because what it is, it's 2 little booklets, and I do have them in the other room, but I don't want to get up and leave you guys here alone. That just would be weird. It's 2 little booklets full of serial killers, and they're about this big. So they're like little rags that you might find at a gas station for a period of time. They had mugshot booklets that were about the same size, but they were designed to fit into your jacket pocket perfectly, which is the reason they're the size that they are. So it doesn't take up much space. You could perform it walk around or in a main stage show. But it's a little creepy, the subject matter, because it surrounds mass murderers and serial killers, just people who have done some really bad stuff.
Okay.
And the selection process is pretty cool. You can have them pick either booklet they want. That's a completely free choice. They flip through the book. They pick any one they want. It's a free choice. And you can tell them who they're thinking of. They don't have to write anything down. There's no peeks to be had. You could technically do it over telephone if they had these booklets in their possession. And the way I like to play it the most is through sort of a psychological deduction game, where they become the serial killer, and I reverse engineer their answers. So I will ask them to lie to me about everything. They never ever tell the truth. They lie about the gender. They lie about how many people that person killed. They lie about how many they've confessed to kill, how they were murdered, and so on. And you reverse engineer all of their lies into whatever the real truth and reality is, right down to that person's name, which is kind of cool.
Awesome. That is very cool.
All without peeking anything, and they have a legitimate free choice, which is kind of fun. And like what we were talking about before with the Prevaricator, once you know one thing in this routine, you know everything. So there's very little. Some people might assume or think that it's sort of a weird anagram system. There's nothing like that.
Right.
Once you know one thing, you know everything, and there's no memory work to be had either, which is also a very cool feature. The only complaints I've gotten about the Killer magazine, and I'll be honest about this, is while most of the people in the magazine were real people that really did do the things that it says they did, I've fudged some of the names up a little bit because of the system involved. So there's one in particular person that is very noted, or very well known over in the UK, that I've got the wrong first name in there. It sounds close, but it's not quite correct. And I got one complaint from someone who said, well, this is completely unusable. These are obviously fake magazines because this person's name is obviously wrong. And then they had an epiphany. And their solution to this problem, which is great, by the way, is that, well, these are crappy American, tabloids. Of course they're not going to be 100% correct, but that doesn't make them any less real. And they love that angle, so they get to make fun of America while doing a cool routine, all in one breath. That's
great entertainment possible. That's great.
Absolutely.
I'll tell you, I'm having glanced back and at the live list here. I've seen we've accumulated a few questions from folks watching.
Oh.
So I'm going to just scroll through that for a second here.
Right. As you scroll there, I'm going to answer the other question we still haven't answered, and that is, what is Glem?
Oh yes, please. Yes, I'm sorry.
And Glem is a book project about creating amnesia or the illusion in amnesia in people, and it was a project that was inspired by a couple different things. One, which I'm sure most people will be familiar with, which was Luke Germain's RGM effect that Kent Nepper published in Luke's very first book, and a J. Sankey Richard Sanders effect, which was also about forgetting. And in both of those routines, they both used a sort of dual reality where what the person on stage experienced and what the rest of the audience experienced were different enough so that if they did speak, they would either assume that that person was crazy or they would buy into the reality that that person experienced. And that's all I can say without giving away what that method was. In my method, it's not a dual reality effect, but it's something I call offset reality. And the difference between the two is in dual reality, of course, you have two different things that people are experiencing. In offset reality, they're the same timeline, but offset by one position. So that something might happen a little bit more before than the other person, which makes it easier to make somebody to legitimately forget that moment. And while it does rely on a real psychological technique, it also relies on a conjuring technique to guarantee 100% of the time that that person will forget what you want them to forget. And it can be anything from their name, it can be a playing card. If folks have seen my Penguin Live lecture, they've seen this technique done with a playing card. But you can do it with the color of somebody's shirt, you can do it with their own name if you want them to. It can be a myriad of different things. This is not the technique that I used when I worked for when I was making the professor forget his name and a myriad of other things. I was using more naked psychological approaches, but both very, very valuable. So the whole book explores that. The second half of the book is also interesting to some people because it explores a bunch of lock effects with ungimmicked padlocks and briefcases where other people can divine the combinations on those devices. So somebody can actually divine the actual combination on your briefcase without knowing how they know and without any additional props besides that briefcase and them, and not know how they know. So they're not being stooged, they're not in on the trick, there's no pre-show work involved in any of this stuff, and yet it still happens. One of those lock effects, by the way, was on the Penguin Live lecture as well, but it originated in the Glem book. And I don't remember the date on it. I think it was 2006 when that came out or something like that. It's been around a while.
Right. That's very fascinating material. And, I'm thinking that, with the people watching this, if you suddenly notice a burst of purchasing on that book and other items on your site in the next day or so, you can give Full Circle Magic a little credit here.
Sure.
You're going to have at least a couple of shopping carts loading up a little later on. But I'm gonna, like I said, I'm gonna jump over because now that my attention's been flagged down a little bit, there's been a couple of posts here from. Actually, there's a couple of posts from a friend of mine, someone I met at the Mind Jam and who saw you there, a guy named Jonathan Levy from Montreal.
Oh, sure, I remember Jonathan.
Remember Jonathan? Okay. So I'm gonna go ahead and ask a few of his questions.
I assume Jonathan is watching now?
Yes, he's watching live. Yes.
Hey, Jonathan, thanks for writing in. Appreciate that. Although, let me thank you after I get the question. Sorry. Go ahead.
He's got a series of them. He's the busy one here on the list. Might Patrick talk about his coin in the fist lie detector effect, your natural approach versus electronic methods? I believe much of this is discussed on the Prevaricator DVD. Is this right?
That is true. That is actually what the Prevaricator project is all about. And we've talked enough about that to death at this point. But I'll just add this. Electronics are wonderful. They're great. However, a good friend of mine whose name I will leave out of this conversation, I saw him do his show in New York City where he was doing sort of a which hand is the special something in with, I think he used about 9 people for that effect. And I was sitting in the audience and I was able to divine in all 3 rounds that he played who had it without looking. Where he only was able to do it the last time because his electronic gizmo wasn't cooperating.
Right.
So I love electronic gizmos. They're great, but they never seem to be working when we really need them the most. And there's another performer, and this is somebody I talk about in the Prevaricator workshop that I saw do something very similar, where they took one of my methods, added electronics into it, to discover that one secret something that they needed to know, rather than just using the method that I use that doesn't involve electronics. And it failed. They actually had to send the special something out of the room to be fixed covertly and then brought back and bring it back in covertly to finish the effect. So I mean, these things happen. I mean, there's lots of them out there. I love them.
Right.
They're fun to toy with. I mean, there's a slew of products out there that have routines of mine alongside them that I've created, but I've never relied on just the technology to create an effect. I usually try to say, this is interesting technology. What can we do to push it further so that it involves more than just what that device has been set out to do? Right. Because when we become reliant on an electronic device to give us or feed us information, we get lazy. We're not working anymore. And so our presentations are also going to slack a little bit too. So I think technology is, of course, fascinating and has a rich history throughout both magic and the world. Magic and science have had this back and forth, back to the beginning of probably the very first magic trick being.
Right.
And for a while there, magic was one step ahead of science in terms of what we knew that scientists didn't know.
Right.
That's fascinating. And now it's this battle where there's these technologies being invented every day that's now a step ahead of us. And now it's what can we do to prove that we're not using science, that we're not using gizmos, we're not using electronics, we're not using robots and hidden cameras and impression-y phone things that, I mean, people are aware of this stuff. And while they're all very cool and they're fun toys, I don't know if they necessarily have a permanent place in our shows. And don't get me wrong, I've used them, I like them, and I would name drop some of them that I like best, but this isn't the right forum to do that, and you should already know where to find them anyway. But when it comes down to the actual show time, you won't see any of them in my shows, just because they haven't been reliable enough for me.
No,
I made the career off of playing with all those gizmos. But it also creates carbon copies. Because it's so easy to do, everybody just goes, oh, well, there's that thing with the markers and the other thing and that thing. Great, perfect. I don't know if that's the right way to go. Hopefully that answers the question.
No, definitely, definitely. I think, also with the position of technology these days, people watching movies with CGI effects that you can't tell the difference between reality and a special effect. That
absolutely.
It is risky to even present in some ways things that involve too much technology. This is why I like. We also the same weekend that we saw your masterclass, we sat in a masterclass with Richard Otterlin, who is very much using old style materials. He's using slates and envelopes and billets and things like that. Somehow seeing that live right in front of you has a much more lasting impact in my mind, because once you pull out a device, anything seems possible. So. No, I definitely agree. Not to mention that, even if you were to use technology, you'd always have you'd always have several fail-safes in your back pocket. So.
And fail-safes are important whether or not you're using technology or not. Because everything can mess up at some point. Right. Nothing is 100%, because we as humans are never going to be 100%. At least probably not in my lifetime.
Yep. I'm gonna continue, because Jonathan is the most questioning person on the list here, and a friend of mine. He said
maybe we should be more suspicious of Jonathan.
There you go. No, he's really there. You can look at the thread yourself. But said also Patrick talked about the value of disclaimers having theatrical value. Might you speak more about your disclaimer? Do you tell audience that you have a degree in psychology, or suggest to the audience that you're an expert in reading body language, facial expressions, or using your knowledge of psychology? Or like Richard Osterlin, you simply perform in a maze and let the audience draw their own conclusions?
Well, like I talked about before, is I think the only time to use a disclaimer is when it's theatrically interesting. And I have disclaimers in my show. I do use a disclaimer. And it's the premise of my show is I can control people's thoughts, feelings, and actions. And I come out and say, I'm going to do that right now. And I really do it. I open my show with a rock paper scissors game in audience mass, where I actually control an entire audience to lose a game of rock paper scissors, and I'm doing that for real, where I beat everybody in 3 rounds. I've done this for rooms. I've done this with just one-on-one, and I've done it for rooms of 3,000 plus people, and still kicked everybody's ass, which is always a thrill when you're using real techniques to do incredible things. I do have, I do study psychology. I do have a degree in psychology, but I don't necessarily promote that as being an expert in psychology, because I'm not an expert. I'm a hobbyist in the psychological realms, because my degree is a bachelor's degree. That's a joke of a degree when it comes to, well, it's great that to have a bachelor's degree. It's not a real degree. It's not a master's degree. It's not a PhD. I'm not Mark Salem. I'm not a guy out there who has 3 different degrees in psychology, has worked on Sesame Street as a consultant, and so on and so forth, like he has, which is a fantastic street cred for a mentalism show. And then you got people like Darren Brown, who doesn't have a degree in psychology at all, but is considered an expert. So I think that can be done, and his disclaimer is fantastic. But it depends on what type of show I'm doing. Right. If I'm doing my entertainment show, the disclaimer is exactly what I told you. I control people's thoughts, feelings, and actions. We show you how easy that is. Right now, create some fun times together. And that's not really much. That's a very soft disclaimer. And yes, it's edges more on the psychological side as being a disclaimer, but much of my show is real. A lot of it isn't real. Some of it uses rote conjuring techniques, and I will be the first to admit that. But a lot of it is actually real psychological stuff. Prevaricator is real psychological stuff. I do a version of Sneak Thief with a kicker ending that's a real kicker ending, where the people end up drawing as a group a picture of my face, and they're really doing it. There's not like a method behind that. They're really doing it subconsciously, which is kind of cool. So I like blending these things. If I'm doing my critical thinking talk, my disclaimer is really, really strong and really heavy that these are conjuring techniques, and that's all they are. And I also try to make sure that whatever set that I choose to do in that environment just involves magic tricks that look hopefully like not magic tricks. And actually I had to play around with that show for quite some time to make sure the material that I was doing wasn't too strong, because when it was too strong, people would buy into it too much no matter what I told them. And I never reveal how anything is done in that talk, because folks become what I call half smart, which is just a polite way of saying they become more dumb. But because there's hundreds of different ways to fool people and to scam people, just knowing 1 or 2 will never make you an expert. It's that adage, you teach a man to fish, which is it's a weird thing for a vegan to be saying. He'll eat. I guess you should say if you teach a man to garden, he'll be able to eat for a lifetime if you know how to plant it in the right place. But if you teach somebody to go to the grocery store, that grocery store might not always be there. So there's an analogy in there somewhere that answers the question.
Oh, definitely. Beautiful. Beautiful. Scrolling down the list a little bit more, I think we're covering most of it here. People are very impressed. One fellow named Owen has said, "Hi, hi. Can you show us more tricks?" I think they are.
We could try something else in a second.
That's
Let's
fine.
get to.
I'm gonna again repeat what I said before. That we're gonna post Patrick's website addresses, although they're easy enough. You have www.patrickredford.com. There are downloadable materials there. I will tell you that earlier today, just as a fluke, an impulse, I saw Patrick. I saw your description download, which was a simple. It's like a book test, but with the back of a deck of cards.
Yep.
And it's an instant download. I had it in my on my computer within 5 minutes of dropping $10 on it, so it was a bargain. And it's I think that's an excellent potential pseudo impromptu effect to pull out of a jacket pocket
Absolutely. It's a great lead into something else with cards. I do a lot of, when I do close-up mentalism or strolling mentalism,
Yep.
I will do a lot of things with cards because I think it's a fantastic tool because there's incredible range that you have and the scale that you have there, those 52 pasteboards. I think it's a wonderful, wonderful thing to have. But it's also interesting that you can do something with that object before they're even taken out of the box. And for those curious, they can think of any word. If you know that little advertisement that's on the back of the box now, they've gotten rid of the back design that was so useful for so many things. They've added that stupid, pledge that they have about how great their cards are, which actually isn't that stupid. It's nice that it's there. But you take that and you have them think of any word on the back, and you circle one of those words, and it's the correct word. And they literally can think of anything, and you'll be able to predict that you've circled the right one.
Yep. And again, it's
correctly, 100%.
100%. Yep. No,
some weird anagram going on. Some people think there's a weird, dry erase, something with the cellophane where you can dry erase. It's not those methods. It's actually a very, very, much more simple, and you'll probably kick yourself going, why didn't I think of that? And if you're familiar with the my tossed out deck, the Ninja Toss deck, tossed out deck, the two methods involved actually lend themselves to each other quite well. If you're familiar with both of those things.
Okay. Speaking of doing cards, also, I don't know if you do it as a strolling item, but another item I have of yours, and I've actually made it up, although I haven't found the place for it quite yet, is your hands-off any card, any number. Yeah. Which is an inspired invention, and people may want to consider looking at that.
The hands-off trick, just a little history on that. We've been talking a long time, so we're going to wrap this up soon.
Yeah, we're going to have to wind it up in a minute.
It's kind of interesting. That originally appeared in one of my very first books as a auspicious coincidence was the title of it. And it was almost exactly as it is now with the hands-off routine. But you can see the growth of that effect over time and where it's come if you have both those materials. Please don't go out and try to find it. The book's out of print. It has sold for ridiculous amounts of money. And most of those things have now been updated other places, so it's not really worth going to find. There's one or two things that are still hidden away just in those books and not anywhere else. But hands-off is one of the most practical card at any numbers that you can do that meets all the conditions. Personally, I think the ACANs, the any card at any numbers, there are more impressive things you can do for an audience. And I'm saying that, and yes, I would love for you to go out and buy it, and if it's a trick that you think you're going to do, please do. But I think there's more impressive things we can do for our audiences that have more emotional appeal and more personal appeal than a card being in the right position in a deck of cards you've never touched. But the conditions are great. This is one of the only, and I think still the only ACAN that's out there that is not stack dependent. In other words, you don't have to have the deck in a particular full stack. You don't have to do any mathematical calculations. There's literally no there's no pass. There's no move per se that happens, and the deck sits on the table and stays in the box, and the audience gets to open the box up, take the cards out, and do the counting of those cards, and the card is in the right position, and they can keep the cards at the end because there's nothing fishy about them, because all 52 are there. Yep. And if there's a compromise, there are two decks of cards involved, but it's no secret. They're both out in the open the whole time. Yep. So that was the one compromise that I made for that routine. But it got an incredible response when the DVD came out, which is funny on how many people don't read books, which I love books. Why don't we read more books? Because the effect had been out there for years. And then when it came out on DVD, 4,000 people bought it over a month. Yeah. And it hasn't received, I'm sure it's received a bad review at this point, but there's been very little negative reviews on it, which I'm very proud of.
Yeah. No, it's a very nice routine, and I think people want to mention it just because, in spite of the fact that you're right, there may be some effects that are greater impact on people. That magicians certainly are fascinated with the ACAN plot, so I wanted to mention yours.
As am I. And if you're interested in the ACAN plot, there's another version in the Heptagon book, under the guise of being a full deck memorized deck, where you have an audience memorize their own deck of cards, and you quiz them. Somebody names any card, they name the number it's positioned at, and they count it down as right. That's something you can do over a telephone. And then there was an in-person version of that in the Triangle booklet that I published as well. And I sort of blend those two methods together when I perform them live now. And then in the Square comic book, which this trick actually is on the hands-off DVD, was an impromptu, completely impromptu method for doing a card at any number with just a borrowed deck of cards, which the other two that I mentioned are also borrowed decks of cards impromptu. But I think that one's the most interesting and the one that I do the most. It was called Fantasy Impromptu, which is on both the hands-off DVD and hidden inside the Square book. I usually hide one or two effects within the pages that aren't listed, so you actually have to read them to find them.
So that's good. That's good. Okay. As we said, we are going to have to wrap up in a second here, but I had made a note to ask a little, one more question. Now, the comics that you've got, that's Triangle, Square, Pentagon, Hexagon, and Heptagon. You said I think that Hexagon is the only one currently available through your site.
I believe Hexagon is the only one available through my site, yes, at the moment.
Yes,
however, I did just stumble across some additional copies of Pentagon, which has my PK Touch routine. David Blaine actually did part of it on his newest special with the fingers coming together. That's part of mine. You can see a performance of that up on my MindTap website as well. There's a lot of cool stuff in there. So I have a couple of copies. If people are interested, please have them shoot me an email. I'm happy to connect you to the product. And I believe I have one or two copies of the over-the-phone booklet as well. So if you really want it and you can't find it anywhere else, I know there's people out there that still have them to buy. I'm out of the bulk of mine, which is why I've taken it off the site. But I think I have one or two here. If you really want it, shoot me an email. I'd be happy to sell you one.
I tell you, you may want to consider a reprint one of these days on the comic book set. I think it's a fascinating idea going with the graphic novel look. And if you're ever thinking, they could be real classics at this point. You could end up with, of course, you could end up like Max Maven with the Prism series, the color series, before he rebound them as Prism. But maybe you would consider a hardcover bound edition of the whole set someday. That would be a wonderful presentation.
Someday that will happen, but I will tell you, because these are full color, that's one of the reasons I haven't reprinted them as comic books. Because while they are comic books, they are, to do short runs of comics are a little bit pricey.
Yep.
And I did pay a professional artist to do the interior artwork. I did the artwork on the outside of them. I did the covers, but he did the interiors. So that's a costly endeavor as well. So it was not a money-making proposition to do the comic book series. It was a labor of love, and they turned out great. I really am happy with the end product that we have. Hopefully someday they will see a hardcover print and be bound all together. But there's something cool about them being, comic books and bound like this.
Yep.
I think they look really great. And full color hardbound is not cheap.
No.
It's not an inexpensive endeavor. So if something like that did come out, unfortunately, the cost for the end user is still a bit higher than I would want to sell something for at this point in time. But maybe. We'll see. Absolutely. I would love that.
Awesome, awesome. Patrick, it's been a real pleasure, let me tell you. It was great meeting you previously. Really terrific spending 2 hours with you like this, and I know from looking at the thread that people have been having a wonderful time listening. We already actually have a page on the Full Circle Magic website that will detail this interview. We'll have links to Patrick's websites as well, which I encourage people to go to and do a little browsing. I think I'll be visiting your site again myself and looking at some of these other materials as soon as this is over, probably. And so we're going to post the links to that again in a few minutes if people have missed it, but that's going to be on our website, along with an audio version. We've begun doing audio versions of these interviews, and in case someone wants to be able to listen to that. Oh, yes, and I'm going to want to get the vegan recipe info URL out of you before we go as well. Maybe we'll post that too. So
you're perfectly welcome.
So again, I want to thank Patrick Redford for being with us today. Before I jump off completely, I want to go back to our listing here and remind people that our next Q&A interview will be June 3rd with Benzie Train, magician and creator.
That's wonderful.
4 p.m. Eastern Time, and hosted by our own Dr. Joaquin Ayala, and we'll all be looking forward to that. And with that, I'm going to say thank you so much, Patrick, for having a time with us here today. There's going to be a lot of people who watch this in recording. If they're out busy on a Saturday, they're going to come back and increase the view count later on, I'm sure, because the word of this interview is going to get around pretty quickly. And if you want to hang on for just a minute, we're gonna end the transmission here and say goodbye to everybody watching at Full Circle Magic. And everybody there, have a wonderful afternoon, and we will see you next time. Thanks so much for coming, those of you who are watching.
Thanks so much for having me.
You bet.